Hi everyone, welcome back to the Advanced Mortgage Solutions podcast. We're joined by a special guest today, Brent Selwyn, who's a property law specialist from KT Law. Welcome, Brent.
Hi Joel, nice to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Hey, look, with first home buyers, there are many pitfalls that they can run into. And I think as we know, it's really important to have representation, a solicitor or a lawyer working on their side of things. So, tell me a little bit about what a property lawyer does.
Yeah, look, I think the important thing is that first home buyers should engage with a lawyer as soon as possible. If only for the first reason for that is that we actually technically are not entitled to do anything to act for someone until they have fulfilled the requirements of the countering of the anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism legislation, which means that we have to get them to complete onboarding protocols and proof of ID. And we also have to have source of funds information, which means that we get perhaps a KiwiSaver approval letter, copy of a bank statement showing a saving history. So that's the first thing, is that it's good to engage really quickly because we are required to by law. And the other thing is that with a lot of property being marketed by agents and vendors these days by either auction or deadline sale, it's very important that a buyer gets their ducks in a row before making an offer. So, earlier the better is the simple message.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what can go wrong, Brent, if someone doesn't engage a lawyer? What are some examples that you've come across?
Well, without picking holes on any particular agent, some agents write contracts very badly. A purchaser might say, for example, to an agent, "Oh yeah, our finance is approved." And what they mean is that it's been pre-approved, which isn't an approval for the particular property. And so sometimes we see contracts where the agent takes them at their word and doesn't include a finance clause, which is potentially a disaster.
Yeah.
Because things about New Zealand contract law is changing your mind isn't a ground to get out of a contract. So when you sign a contract subject to perhaps a land information memorandum, finance, insurance, and a building inspection report, you have a common law duty, a duty at law, to make all reasonable endeavours to satisfy those conditions. So what I like to encourage clients to do is to actually get hold of us with the draft agreement and let us eyeball it before they sign it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it gives them peace of mind going into the contract that what they're signing is legitimate and has those clauses in it.
Yeah, it has all the protections that we would want them to have.
Yeah.
That if we do need to try and extract them from the contract, we have legitimate grounds upon which to do so.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you've mentioned prior to this a little bit about there's still ongoing earthquake issues across Canterbury at the moment in terms of claims. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that and why, again, it's really important to have legal representation to help with those type of issues?
Well, within any pre-earthquake home, extraordinarily 15, 16 years later, we are still assigning residual rights in earthquake claims. And of course, earthquake claims were settled in a number of different ways. There was an earthquake recovery authority set up, and Fletcher's won the contract to oversee managed repairs. And so for homes that have been a managed repair, we will typically get a suite of documents which make it obvious that that is the case. We'll get scopes of works, we'll get scopes of works changes, we'll get costings, invoices, documentation whereby an approved contractor was appointed. And it's really important that all of that is analysed, because although claim residual rights can be assigned, there is no longer the ability to raise new damage. Try to reopen it if there proves to be poorly repaired earthquake damage. And the other way that earthquake claims, of course, were settled was cash settled. And more often than not, we find that we get evidence of the cash amount that a previous vendor or the current vendor received. But often there's no receipts, no invoices, no nothing. And makes it very, it's then very important that the buyer has a comprehensive building inspection report and that building inspector has a copy of the scope of works to make sure that all of the earthquake damage has been repaired and repaired as well as possible.
Mm.
Yes, there's a third nuance as well, and that is the as is, where is, where people buy a property that they're not getting any assignment of the earthquake claims because a previous party has bought it as is, where is, and there hasn't been an assignment of claims. That is a really specialist area because you've got no recourse against anyone once you own that home. I've had
Yeah.
come back to me going, oh gosh, how can I open the claim? I go, well, I'm sorry, you can't, and we did tell you this.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of thorny little issues still around earthquakes.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I've got a personal story there. Actually, was actually a first home that was selling not long after the earthquakes, and we had a settlement for the paths. It was just like one of those quick, here's it wasn't a huge settlement. It was under 10 grand for paths repairs and stuff, and
Yep.
we just sort of put it off and spent the cash on something else. It was a cash settlement. And when we sold, the lawyer on the other side, the purchaser's solicitor, did a really good job and brought it up and said, hey, look, where's the receipts for the repairs on the paths? And I said, we didn't get them done. So that became part of the negotiation. We had to settle, deduct a certain amount off the sale price, which was fair. And we were happy to roll with that. But that's a great example where the solicitor did a really good job to pick that up and raise that,
There were some ordinary circumstances. We
Mm.
saw buying motorhomes with their
Right.
insurance claims, people buying caravans.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you say quite correctly, when they came to sell,
Mm.
buyers would go, well, hang on a moment, you've been paid X amount of dollars. You need to credit that to my buyer so
Yeah.
that they can in turn do the work. So, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's not happening quite so much these days, but we still do get the occasional contract where there's a transfer of $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 because a path or a driveway hasn't been repaired.
Yeah. Interesting. Brilliant. And look, a lot of people are moving to Canterbury and Christchurch at the moment. It seems to be an influx, particularly after COVID. I was in that boat. I moved from Auckland back to Christchurch to be around family. Tell us what you're seeing in that space, and again, why it's important for people, out of Canterbury moving in to get correct local, I would argue, representation because you're familiar with what's going on.
Yeah, we do see a lot. We have, and we are still seeing a lot of people moving from places like Auckland and Wellington to
Mm.
Christchurch for a number of reasons. It's affordable by comparison. Our average price in Auckland now, I believe, is north of $1 million. Average price in Christchurch is somewhere in the 700 to 715 range, I think. And so there's two factors around that. One is that we are seeing people coming from other centres, and two, Christchurch's market is still first home buyer friendly, which is
Yeah.
great for us as a law firm. So with typical scenario, which we've seen on numerous occasions with people from Auckland in particular, is selling maybe a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment and being able to buy a 4-bedroom home in somewhere like Lincoln or Rolleston.
Wow.
So, and the thing about the local representation is quite important. I act for people who are investors who buy property in Christchurch, who intentionally will use a Christchurch lawyer instead of using their usual Auckland lawyer, because with no disrespect to the Auckland lawyers, they won't have come across the nuances of all of the earthquake matters we've talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Brilliant. All right. Look, Brent, obviously we've covered, why it's exceptionally important to have representation when you're buying your first home, to help navigate through the pitfalls such as earthquake issues and many others. If someone's wanting to work with you, do you have any offers or at the moment that you're running for people, and how does that process work?
Yeah, I like certainty in work that people do for me. So for about the last 15 years, I've been giving that certainty to my clients. When I get a referral, I send a standard email, which is basically my cost guarantee email, but it also sets out what clients can expect to get from me. One of the things I do is that for first home buyers particularly, I will review an auction pack or a deadline pack, and if they're unsuccessful, I won't send them a separate bill. I sometimes pick up clients who come to me via an agent who say, oh, look, this buyer's been unsuccessful twice and it's cost them $1,000 already and they don't yet own a home. So that's one of the things I do. And the other thing I do is I put the fee in writing and I guarantee that it won't change. as long as the instruction to me doesn't change. So in other words, if someone says, oh, I'm going to buy a home, and then they go, well, actually, it's going to be in my company and my trust's going to have to provide a guarantee, then I'll say, well, hang on a moment, you've moved the goalposts.
Yeah.
But for your average first home buyer, I find that they really like the fact that I pinpoint the fact that my firm isn't the cheapest. It's not the dearest by a long, long way, but that I will absolutely guarantee the cost.
Yeah. Brilliant. It's so good with peace of mind, getting peace of mind when you're looking to buy a home because, the costs build up pretty quick, as you mentioned, And look, just go ahead.
No, that's right. You're right. They do. They can. And we do reserve the right, if people obviously are unsuccessful 2 or 3 times, to charge. But I even put that in my email. I say that it might be $190 to $350 for the third one.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, if someone wants to get hold of you, Brent, what's the best way to do that, to book an appointment?
Yeah, my law firm, KT Law, has a website, as you'd expect, and it has a contact page or a submissions page on ktlaw.co.nz, and we typically get half a dozen submissions a day with people who know about the offerings we provide, inquiring about cost and service expectations.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, for those listening, just to reiterate that was ktlaw.co.nz. And thanks, Brent, for joining us. We look forward to having you on the next episode.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.